I finally finished Avatar: The Last Airbender live action. I actually wasn't going to, but some of the people in my comments were like, no, you should finish it. It's pretty good. It took me like a month to finish. Honestly, it kind of felt like a chore. I did enjoy the last 3 episodes though, but for whatever reason, the show just didn't really resonate with me. It seems like it has a lot of the bare bones of a really interesting story and characters, but for whatever reason, it just didn't connect. I don't know if maybe they cut some stuff out that was important to get attached to the characters. Maybe I just missed stuff because I kind of got bored with it the first half. It sort of felt like to me, if you watched Power Rangers in the 90s as a kid and you loved it, and then when you grew up, you watched it again, you were like, holy crap, how did my parents watch this with me? It felt kind of like that, except if you didn't actually watch it as a kid, so the nostalgia just wasn't there. This is one of those things I'd be really curious to see how the people who really liked it and they liked the original would have felt about it if it was just its own thing and not based on the original and they had the nostalgia. Like I said, there was some good pieces in there. The whole relationship between Zuko and his uncle Iroh, I really liked. I liked Zuko's backstory and his arc and kind of where the character is going, or at least seems like he's going. I like his uncle and his whole kind of wise mentor thing that he has going, and like there was a lot of good stuff between them. And I think his dad is a pretty good antagonist. Kind of a typical anime protagonist in some ways. The whole only strength matters, you have to be merciless type thing, at least so far. But a huge problem with this show was the acting. And I wouldn't even blame the kids or the actors because every single performance just wasn't very good. I don't know if this was a choice to make it feel a little bit more kid-friendly and cartoony. I don't know if they were trying to make it more like the cartoon. It just came across as a little bit weird. I have no idea what the issue was, but I don't believe that all the actors in the show are just bad actors. That doesn't even make any sense. But I like the archetypes of the characters. I like the idea of the reluctant hero with Aang. I think Sokka had an interesting arc if he keeps going this way in the next seasons, where he wanted to be a leader and he had this thing that he envisioned himself becoming, but what he ended up being good at and maybe even more interested in was something totally different, which was obviously engineering. That's a really good setup for a good character arc, because I think that's something that probably 99% of people go through in their life, where they have the thing that they want to be and the thing they care about, and then what they're actually good at, and you have to decide, because they don't align. Katara was okay. The pacing of her arc felt a little bit weird to me. Like I said, I wasn't super invested in the first half, so maybe I missed things. But it seemed like she went from like no training at all to start, and then she just kind of hit like a glitch in the later one, and by episode 6 or 7, she was fighting like the best waterbender in battle. And she was fighting on equal footing with Zuko and stuff. It just sort of seemed jumbled. And I thought the whole thing with the weird water monster at the end just felt like it came out of nowhere. Again, maybe I missed some clues to that, or a line of dialogue somewhere along the way. Maybe it's one of those things that has a better explanation than the original, and they just didn't really explain it too much here. Because it kind of felt like this thing where they were all like, well, she can do this, and there's no getting around it. And they're like, oh, then Aang can do this, but he can never return. And then Katara's like, no, Aang, you mean a lot to me. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he's fine now. It just seemed a little bit all over the place. And I don't know if that was the setup or me not paying attention or they just rushed it, because the pacing felt super weird that way. Like the last 3 episodes, maybe even 4, I felt were pretty nonstop. And the first 4, it felt kind of like just traveling around, kind of dicking around a little bit, getting a little bit of character set up. It sort of felt disjointed from the first half of the season to the second half for me. I wouldn't say it was a terrible show or anything. I just didn't get super invested in it, and if people hadn't asked me to finish watching it, I'm not sure if I would have. It does make me curious about watching the original, though, because even if they had the same length of time on screen, because the first season for the original is 20 episodes, and this one was 8, that kind of range from 45 minutes to an hour, so the screen time is close. You just can't do the same things in a 20-minute episode that you can in an hour one, because they have to be structured differently, obviously, for the storytelling. You can't just stack 3 episodes together and then make 8 episodes like that. And another thing with Katara at the end, or maybe it was done better in the show, or maybe this is original to the live action, I don't know, is the whole thing with the women and the men in the north and the women not being allowed to fight and her telling the old guy they need to change to survive and all that just felt very on the nose. It's one of those things that I can't tell if they just slapped it in there, if it was better done in the original, or even if it's one of those things that was done in the original, but because it's in animated form, you can kind of get away with a little bit more, you know, as far as being on the nose and exposition and that sort of thing. I know no one likes to admit that, but I think it's the truth. If you look at anime and stuff, sometimes if you step back, the writing is pretty bad, but people still love it, as far as like the exposition dumps and that sort of thing. but she was fine overall. It's weird to have a show where you're less interested in the three protagonists than the antagonist. Like, I found the stuff with Aang, Katara, and Sokka much more dry and boring than the stuff with Zuko and Iroh, and even Azula to some degree, even though she didn't have much screen time. I didn't hate the show, didn't love it. People took the time to watch my first video and comment, so I figured I could watch it. And maybe I'll get to the original now before the next 2 seasons come out. If you watched the whole show, let me know what you think. Is what I said fair? Is it unfair? Do you think I just missed shit because I wasn't super invested? And if I had called it, maybe I would have enjoyed it more. For the people who've seen both this and the original, how do you think they compare? I saw some people say that they thought they were both on almost equal footing in my other comments. And I also got quite a few comments saying just watch the original. It seemed kind of split. One thing I'll say is that it definitely didn't feel like an adaptation that hated the fans or the source material. For me, if the fans consider this a bad adaptation or whatever, this is like what the bar should be. It shouldn't be Halo or The Witcher or Rings of Power or Wheel of Time, where they're rewriting entire world building and character arcs and everything and just destroying everything that it originally was and then slapping the name on it. Halo is the most egregious that I'm familiar with the lore and the show, but I've heard a ton of complaints about The Witcher, Rings of Power, Wheel of Time. And to me, this was inoffensively mediocre. This was like, yeah, they tried, but for whatever reason, it just didn't connect. It happens. I try to respond to all the comments. Let me know what you thought. If you're still here, like and subscribe and all that. Thanks. See ya.